This poor man had no name for 16 years. Most people are given a name when they are born, and it remains their name for the rest of their lives. Some people change their names throughout their lives for different reasons. Some don't like their names. Or maybe they get married and change their last names. Well, the man in this story is a bit different. This man had no name. The reason behind it, though, will shock you. For 16 long years, he lived without a name, and it all started in June of 1999. He was brought to San Diego Hospital and nobody knew who he was. He was found in the desert and he had no identification on him. He was an immigrant from Mexico who had crossed the border illegally. He, like many people trying to cross the border illegally, was coming to the United States in search of a better life. On the way, he was involved in a car accident. He was in a pickup truck and it crashed in the desert. That's not uncommon with people trying to flee Mexico. Unfortunately, he was not wearing a seatbelt. When the truck crashed, it was driving at a very high speed and he was ejected from the vehicle. Sadly, everyone that was in the vehicle died except for this unknown man. He was, however, seriously injured. The worst of his injuries was the damage caused to his brain. When he hit his head, he was taken to the hospital alone and nobody knew his name. He also lost most of his nerve functions. He was in very serious condition and he couldn't tell anybody who he was. The people at the hospital went through his buckets to see if they could find anything with his name on it, but there was no identification. All he had in his pockets were a few pesos, a few dollars, and a phone card. The hospital couldn't tell anything about him except that he looked very young. He had a round face that was free of wrinkles. He did, however, have a small amount of dark fuzz on his chin. The doctors estimated he was probably between the ages of 18 and 20 years old. It was sad because most Americans were heading off to college at that age. And this poor man was unidentified and fighting for his life. At the hospital, the man technically was awake, but he was in a persistent vegetative state because he was still alive and in need of medical care. The hospital was obligated to care for him. It didn't matter that they didn't know who he was. They couldn't turn off the machines that were keeping him alive because they couldn't find any relatives of this nameless man to make medical decisions for him. When the hospital could no longer do anything for him, they transferred him to a long-term nursing home, and he was now in the care of the state of California. Like the doctors at the hospital, the staff at the nursing home couldn't identify him. He had no scars or tattoos and he couldn't tell anybody his name. Soon after his arrival, the nurses began calling him Pancho. Pancho is just a nickname for Francisco since he was in San Francisco. That's what they called him. Still, they needed an official name for the man. Soon after, the nurses began calling him by common Mexican first names, just to see if he would respond. They tried Juan, Jesus and Pedro. Unfortunately, he didn't respond to any of them. He was still unable to speak, unable to sit up or eat on his own. Even breathe on his own. The name they put on his official forms was much more strange than the nickname they gave him. The legal name they gave him was 66 Garage. Nobody knew why they gave him this particular name, but it was his now a social worker who heard about the man got involved after she heard of that name that they gave him. She tried, unsuccessfully, to get them to change the name. She believed that that name that he was given didn't offer the man any dignity while in the nursing facility. His care was being paid for by the state of California to keep the man on life support. It costs the state $700 a day. There were times that he could follow the doctor's movements with his eyes, and when he started doing that, the doctors realized that despite the fact he had brain damage, he was still in there. He was conscious for the next 16 years. The nurses started calling him Garage. When the nameless man's story started to spread, dozens of families started calling the nursing home, hoping that the nameless man might be their loved one. They'd call asking about scars, moles, tattoos. These people were very disappointed when they found out that the man had no distinguishing marks for years. The nursing home continued to care for this nameless man over the next 16 years. Thousands of families had called that nursing home. The nameless man wasn't the only one in this situation either. Turns out that thousands of families get separated trying to get into the US. There are even Facebook pages set up to help these people find their families. One day, a woman named Luis Ana Laura saw a photo of the man and she realized that he resembled her brother Gilberto. She said that he had gone missing at about 19 years old back in 1999. When she saw the photo, she flew from her home in Houston, TX, to California. When she got to the nursing home, she realized that it was not her brother. Still, she stayed by his bedside the whole weekend. A woman named Paula also went to check on this nameless man. Occasionally she first saw him when she was visiting a relative in the nursing home, and she started to see the nameless man. Each day the woman searched and searched for anyone who might know the man. Finally, she got a break. Enrique Morones, the founder of an organization called Border Angels. He took the man's fingerprints to border control and they finally found a name. When they contacted his family, they found out that both of his parents had already died. They were, however, able to reach his sister after a DNA test. It was proven that he was her brother. He's still in this nursing home today. Sadly, Paula is no longer allowed to see him because they found out who he was and she was not his sister. His actual sister went back to Mexico, but she still video chats with him once in a WHI.